So, having Tourette's syndrome sucks. I've had it all my life, obviously, but it became more pronounced as I became older. I was officially diagnosed when I was 26. Now, that's over 20 years ago, sadly. When I was younger, I had lots of habits and things that I now know were tics and obsessive behaviors, but I didn't know what they were at the time. I just thought they seemed normal to me, wanting to touch wood. If I hit something with my left hand, I accidentally, then I wanted to also touch it with my right hand. I had little things that, I would talk along with a show on the television, do the dialogue with them, just quietly to myself, especially if I was alone. I didn't really think there was anything particularly different about this. But as I got older and my twitches and my tics and my facial gestures became more pronounced, I decided to get a diagnosis. And I went to a doctor and he said, "Have you been on the internet researching things?" And I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "Well, I don't think there's anything going on here, but I'll refer you to a neurologist anyway." So I went to a neurologist, and a while later, this same doctor called me in, and he gave me a report, and he said, "I apologize. You were right. You have Tourette's syndrome." So what does that mean? Well, it means that right now, doing this video, I'm controlling myself the same way I do when I am in a job interview or meeting someone for the first time. It means that my tics are minimized because, well, the comparison I use is it's like blinking. If you think about it, you can stop yourself. At some point, you're going to want to do it. And when I was teaching full time, I used to kind of hold back and hold it in. And at the end of the day, in the evening, I would do what's nicknamed paying your tic tacs. I would be almost out of control in the evening. As I got further into my career and became more comfortable with myself, I realized that almost all students are very accepting of it. And I really appreciate that from them. But fortunately, I don't have a tremendously severe case. I don't have the type where bark or swear uncontrollably, at least not usually. There are occasions. Um, those are kind of stereotypical. Those are the kinds you see in movies and on TV. And for most people, Tourette's isn't like that. But I'm still awfully tired of it, especially since my head injury a little over a year ago. One of the things that it affected a little bit was my concentration. And that basically means, effectively, my Tourette's has gotten worse. It's harder to control. What does my Tourette's look like? Well, one of the things I like to do a lot is touch my glasses lens like this, to the point that I actually wind up having to replace my glasses fairly often because they get scratched. Another thing I will do is touch wood grains. And a lot of times I'll actually say touch wood and things like that. And it can be distracting for people around me, but believe me, it's worse for me. It's not something I want to do. It's not something I like doing. There's this weird feeling you have that if you don't do it, something terrible is going to happen. Now, I'm a rational person. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't believe in knocking on wood for good luck. But it's this irrational feeling that you have like your head is going to explode if you don't do this. If I don't touch my glasses lens, if I don't look through my fingers like this sometimes, if I don't touch wood, particularly wood grains of certain things that I associate with places or people, you feel like the world's going to end. You know it's not going to, but you feel like it is. When I'm watching television or a movie by myself, I pause it a lot. I don't do it when I'm watching it with other people. I do have that degree of control. But if I'm watching a movie by myself or TV by myself, I will quite often pause it. I don't know exactly why. It's like I have to properly frame what I've seen or what I've heard. Sometimes I will repeat what I've heard. I just have to do it until it feels right, and then I can move on. It's very difficult to describe. So I have stopped teaching full time, partly, hi Daisy, partly because of my headaches and my degree of dizziness that happens occasionally. Not all the time anymore. I've improved a lot, but it still happens sometimes and it's unpredictable. But also because my Tourette's has gotten worse. It's gotten more distracting. Now, a lot of people misunderstand it. I remember sitting years ago in a meeting with parents and a student who was struggling in school, and the parents said, "Well, he has trouble understanding because he has Tourette's." And I paused and I thought, okay, do I say something? And I said, yes, I say something. I said, "Hello, my name's Dr. Wright. I have a PhD. I'm a member of Mensa. and I have Tourette's. So don't tell me he has a cognitive problem because of it. Now, he might get distracted, he might read more slowly, he might have trouble paying attention, but he doesn't have a cognitive deficit because he has Tourette's. When I say read more slowly, one of the things that I focus on is text, numbers, words, letters, and I will quite often have to pause or want to pause when I see something that forms a complete loop, like in some text fonts, the letter A or the letter E or an O or a 0 or a 9 or a 6. Right now, I just did a twitch the way I like to do it, just to show you what it looks like, because the bottom of my screen, the timer says 05 in some seconds. Sometimes I will have to scan it until I see an odd number or a prime number of those loops before I can move on. It really sucks being really good at math and having Tourette's, because I understand things like prime numbers and logarithms and stuff, and they play into it. So sometimes I can read right along perfectly fine, but sometimes it slows me down because I keep getting caught up in looking at these loops or looking at the text. And with the concussion injury that I suffered, sometimes my vision gets a little bit fuzzy, and that makes it even worse. That makes it even harder to concentrate. So I really enjoy reading. I love reading, but I don't do it for very long at a time anymore. So, um, Tourette's is something you can Google. It's something you can look up. I understand on YouTube, there's this Tourette's guy. Really not a good representation of most of us. Sadly, there's no cure. There are medications that can help. I take one. It makes it a little bit easier to control my obsessions and my tics, but it's certainly not completely effective, and it's very frustrating sometimes, and it's very tiring sometimes. Imagine that you work hard all day. In my case, that was teaching school. You're interacting with students, you're presenting information, you're assessing, you're evaluating, you're dealing with people all the time, constantly dealing with people, sometimes 30 or 40 at once, sometimes bigger groups in certain situations. You're trying to stay focused, you're trying to allow them to stay focused. That's a tiring job. Now imagine that you have to try to maintain some kind of mental control over yourself that whole time to prevent yourself from doing things that you really want to do. Imagine how much more tiring that would be. I used to come home from work completely exhausted, unable to think, unable to move, just flop on a bed for a couple of hours. It's really frustrating. Now, I have another condition that I've mentioned in my videos before, ankylosing spondylitis. It has nothing to do with well, I suppose it does affect nerves, so I guess there's a relation to neurology, but it has to do with my skeletal system essentially being attacked. And it's kind of like arthritis' evil cousin. That also causes fatigue. So really, it's very hard for me to work full time at the moment. I would like to. Um, I don't like the idea of sitting around on my butt. It makes me feel lazy. But really, there's not a whole lot I can do with it until somebody comes along with some kind of improved medication, improved treatment. And yeah, so next time you're watching Tourette's Guy on YouTube, or next time you're watching a movie where they're making fun of Tourette's, remember it's real people. And I like to be able to poke fun at it as well. I mean, I don't really, I'm not that sensitive anymore. When I was first diagnosed, I was quite sensitive, but right now I say things like, you know, my former wife had Parkinson's in her family, and I have Tourette's. I used to say we shouldn't have any children because you're going to look in their crib and you're going to think your eyes are out of focus because they're just going to be vibrating. I don't mind making jokes about it. I don't mind other people making jokes about it, but I have occasionally had people pick on my kids because their stepfather has Tourette's, and I draw the line there. So remember, we're all people. We all have flaws. Mine are really kind of obvious when I'm not bothering to control them. But, well, screw it. It's who I am.